How does the curves tool work in Photoshop? The curves tool is the main tool for working with lighting in Photoshop. All professional light work is done through this tool. Additionally, it also works with color, but the most important thing is the light. Let's begin. Note that our histogram is a square divided into 4 squares horizontally and 4 squares vertically. And there is this kind of drawing. What is this drawing? This drawing is called the histogram. The histogram shows what the photograph consists of, specifically this photograph. I'll show you this chart. This is a classic chart that artists use to study light. And you can see that this cube is divided into 4 parts. From right to left, highlight, light, midtone, shadow. Our photograph consists of these 4 areas. And these 4 cubes on the histogram horizontally show these areas. This entire column is the highlight. Then comes the light. After that, the midtone. And the last is the shadow. And with the histogram, we can find out what exactly this photograph consists of. We look at the highlights and see that there are quite a lot of highlights in this photograph. That is, this very right part. Let's imagine there are 255 points here. From left to right, 255 points. The very right part, the very right point is the whitest part of the photograph. If we zoom in here, we'll find that the whitest part is somewhere right here, just a little bit of these whitest areas. But this is also a highlight. After that, we see that there is also a lot of light in our photograph. All of this is light. Everything that the histogram in this cube shows is light. There is a lot of light in the photograph. There are also a lot of midtones. What could be midtones in this photograph? Where the eyes are, where the lips are, right here, a little under the nose, that's midtone. And there are shadows too, not very many, but they are there. What could these areas be? These are our eyebrows, eyes, pupil, where the nose is, in the mouth. So the very darkest part is this part. But all these parts are present in our photograph. Now let's look at this line. This is the default lighting line. If this line moves up, the photograph will lighten. If it moves down, the photograph will darken. So we can control the photograph to be lighter or darker. And along this line, we can see which part has lightened or darkened and by how much. If I do it like this, we see that the whitest, the very right point, has not gone any higher. Why? Because it's the maximum. It's simply impossible to be whiter. But we see that this part, which was quite a lot before, has risen quite a bit from the original line. That is, the photograph has lightened here. In the light, it has lightened this much. In the midtones, it has also lightened, but not as much as in the highlights and light. And even the shadow has lightened a little, but not as much as the highlight and light. Why is it called a curve? Because it can be bent in any direction. For example, if I place a central point and lift it perfectly upwards, you will see that the very whitest point stayed in place and the very darkest point stayed in place. But the light and midtone, and even a little bit of the highlight and the darkest at the beginning, lightened a bit, but the extreme point stayed. From this, we understand to evenly lighten or darken the photograph, we must move the curve perfectly along the vertical line. That is, to evenly lighten the photograph, you need to do it like this. To evenly darken, you need to do it like this. Great. If you want to move sideways, you will see that the light has moved much further from the original point than, say, the midtone. The midtone has also lightened quite a bit, but not as much as this bend. Great. It's a bit complicated. The curve is made in such a way that it may seem very complicated at first. But over time, you will understand how this tool is arranged, and it will be easier for you to understand what is happening with your photograph and how you can work with it in terms of light. You can also anchor the curve. For example, move the points and shift this part. And look what happened. This part darkened much more. And this part lightened a bit, or vice versa. You can see how the darkest part has lightened from here to here. And you can see how our eyelashes, eyebrows, and inside the mouth have become lighter. If I remove this point, the midtones also become lighter. If I raise this point, this part becomes lighter too. If I remove everything, you can see how much lighter the photo has become. The highlight remains a highlight, as you can see here. Now let's talk a bit about color. If I take red, we can see where red is on our histogram. Note that when we talk about red, we don't mean just the specific red line, but everything that can be called red. There's a concept called the red color group. Everything we can call red belongs to the red color group. Light red, dark red, saturated red, unsaturated red, red closer to orange or red closer to pink, but it's all red. We can see that red in our photo is mainly in the highlights, meaning in the highlights and light areas, and there's almost no red in the midtones and shadows. But if we take, for example, blue, we see that there's almost no blue in the highlights, a lot in the light areas, and a lot in the midtones. So almost all the blue in our photo is in the midtones. And we can add or reduce blue. Note that it's about adding or reducing. If I reduce blue, the photo will shift to the opposite of blue. The opposite of blue is yellow, and if I increase it, blue will be added. But note, it doesn't turn blue, but rather a purple. Why? Because this curve doesn't repaint one color into another, but adds blue to the existing color. Our photo is red. Blue plus red makes magenta, or even closer to purple. And on the curve, we can see how much is added to each area. For example, if I move the top point, you'll see blue is added to the highlight. And if I move the bottom point, blue is added to the dark areas. You can see the eyebrows, eyes, and eyelashes immediately change color, or in the opposite direction. So to yellow, so to blue. So to yellow, so to blue. With this, you can also tone photos and create cool effects. The lesson was a bit challenging, but interesting. Now you know how the curves tool works.